Hello everyone, my name is Timur Braev, and today I would like to present an overview of the TMLR paper titled Semantic-Syntactic Discrepancy in Images, SSDI, Learning Meaning and Order of Features from Natural Images. The authors of the paper are Yun Tao, Timur Braev, and Kaushik Roy from Purdue University. As the motivation of this work, I would like you to look at the following images. These images depict objects with very blatant manipulations that do not appear naturally, and when given to any person for assessment, would probably be flagged as artificial, handcrafted, or even weird. Regardless of this, however, it turns out that vision models would be perfectly unbothered by such manipulations. In the case of ResNet 18, it gives very high confidence that this is a human face shown here, and when giving a prompt with a prompt to describe this image, Google Gemini gives a description of the image without mentioning any abnormality and completely unbothered by image being very handcrafted and artificial. This exposes that models mainly focus on the presence of object features, but do not on whether their arrangement is natural with respect to human perception. To address this gap in this work, we rely on the concept of image grammar. Just like in language, we have the concept of grammar. The concept of image grammar requires the model to learn image semantics, that is, the meaning of each individual object feature, and image syntax, that is, the natural arrangement of object features. Based on that, we term this vulnerability that is shown in the images here on the slide as semantic-syntactic discrepancy in images, SSDI for short. Let us start from defining SSDI. We define semantic syntactic discrepancy as occurrence in images that have visually identifiable semantic features, but look unnatural to humans in their appearance and composition due to incorrect arrangement or missing some of those features. The key here, as we'll discuss in the later slides, is that each feature as a whole should remain more or less visually identifiable. Regarding origin, we believe that this vulnerability in vision models stems from the very fundamental assumption during training that all input images depict objects accurately in their natural appearance and composition. That is to say, vision models simply never see unnatural images during training. Hence, as lazy as they are, they tend to simply rely on the presence of object features and not so much on whether their arrangement makes up a meaningful object. In this work, we explore three types of SSDI corruptions. Please note, we will be using corruptions and vulnerability interchangeably here. These three types are patch shuffling, where we take a subset of patches or features and swap them within the image. Patch blackening, where the subset of patches or features is removed from the image. And finally, puzzle solving, which is essentially similar to patch shuffling, but the difference is for patch solving, we generate a series of patch shuffling corruptions. And then from those patch shuffling corruptions and the original natural clean image, the model must determine which one is the most natural looking image. Please note that there might be more corruptions that fit into the definition of SSDIs. Being exploratory work in nature, in this work, we focus our analysis to this type of corruptions. Before we proceed to analysis portion of the work, it is a good idea to compare semantic syntactic discrepancy with existing robustness paradigms in the neural network-based computer vision domain. First, we compare SSDI with common corruptions, for example, ImageNet dataset. The main difference here is that unlike common corruptions, SSDI does not degrade images randomly, but instead disrupts the compositional integrity of the objects shown in the image. From this perspective, SSDI can be thought as more target-oriented corruptions than common corruptions like blur, noise, color, and contrast variations. Next, SSDI can be compared to out-of-distribution samples. We can say that these two vulnerabilities differ in terms of how they define unseen distributions. Generally, while there is a shift involved in OOD, the shift is from one distribution that has meaningful natural images to another distribution that also has meaningful and natural images. For example, a shift from natural photos of dogs to pencil drawn images of dogs. In both cases, there is an assumption that meaningful objects are present in both distributions. In contrast, SSDI is observed between two distributions having the same family of objects. It means semantics is preserved, but the structural integrity of objects differs between them. It means syntax is removed. From this perspective, SSDI can be thought as complementary to out-of-distribution samples. Finally, SSDI differs from adversarial examples. Adversarial examples are specifically crafted such that manipulations are imperceptible to human eyes. As a result, they target systems that would have human in the loop for extra assessment step. In contrast, SSDI corruptions are perceptible to human eyes. Hence, they target AI systems that would operate autonomously without any human in the loop. For example, think of auto-labeling system that would be tasked with collecting images for the new data set of certain objects from the unconstrained environment like the internet. In such scenarios, the system would naively grab the images with semantic-syntactic discrepancy as long as the object features would be visible enough to convince the system that it actually contains the object. So, okay, with that said, the logical next question is how susceptible the current vision pipelines are to SSDI corruptions, which leads us to the first part of the paper where we analyze different models against various SSDI corruptions. We started with the models that process only images without language processing. Specifically, the table here shows classification accuracies obtained on ImageNet 2012 validation samples with patch shuffling SSDI corruptions. Within this work, SSDI corruptions are generated by considering square patches only. Hence, the columns represent how an image of 224 times 224 pixels can be broken down into square patches. Based on the resulting number of patches, however, each row represents different number of patches that were used for generating SSDI corruptions. For example, if we take like 8 by 8 patches and divide the image into 8 by 8 patches, we will have in total 784 patches. And the depth, each row shows that how many of those patches out of 784 we're going to use to generate SSDI corruption. Since the patches are packed at random, each cell represents the average accuracy of 5 independent runs. Now, let's analyze this table. We can make the following observation. First, for smaller patches of 14 by 14 pixels and less, shown in the left portion of the table, the model performance degrades drastically as more patches are used for corruption. The accuracy here drops below 30% constantly. Yeah. On the other hand, for larger patches of 16 by 16 pixels and more, shown in the right portion of the table, the degradation of the model performance is much more graceful. In most cases, the accuracy does not drop below 50%. Now, in order to explain this behavior, let us examine qualitative samples. Here we show randomly picked samples at different degrees of SSDI corruption along with the original images. First, with regards to smaller patches, we can see that image manipulations with small patches sizes are much less impactful that can be perceived more as a noise. When the number of patches used to generate corruptions is small, that is, the top portion of the table, the impact is negligible in terms of being perceived by human eyes. When the number of patches is large, that is the bottom portion of the table for that columns, such manipulations impact the image as a whole, and with extreme cases turning the entire image into unrecognizable noise. Now, if we look at the corruptions generated with larger patches, we can see that here, despite manipulations make the image appear unnatural, the individual features of an object, in this case, say, dog eyes, paws, tail, remain visually recognizable. We acknowledge that the degree of naturalness is a subjective measure. For example, saliency may be varying from person to person. However, we also highlight that the amount of changes induced by removing or swapping 2 out of 4 patches of size 112 is more conspicuous to human eyes than that of the 64 patches removed out of 784 of size 8 by 8. Both of which, interestingly, result in the same amount of accuracy degradation in the model. As a result, this highlights that the definition of semantic-syntactic discrepancy, which said that the features should remain visually identifiable. For the given images of ImageNet of size 224 by 224 pixels, Patch shuffling and patch blackening at the patch sizes equal to and larger than 16 times 16 pixels cause images to appear unnatural while the underlying object parts remain visually identifiable. Next, we analyzed a model that has a multimodal processing capability. That is, it can process both images and natural language prompts. Specifically, we evaluated Meta's Llama model version 3.2 with 11 billion parameters available on Hugging Face Hub. The analysis was performed by generating SSDI corruptions on 3,000 samples picked from ImageNet validation set, and then processed all these corrupted samples with one of the three prompts. As shown in the table here, the three prompts are: what is the class of the object shown in the given image? Describe the given image, and does the given image appear natural or unnatural here? Based on these prompts, each cell represents the percentage at which Llama's model response explicitly mentioned that the given sample looked unnatural, corrupted, or tampered with. This was measured by collecting Llama's responses and then evaluating collected responses with OpenAI's ChatGPT model, with prompt requesting ChatGPT to answer, does the given response mention anything that indicates that the given image is unnatural, corrupted, or tampered with? So the main idea here is that each prompt provides a different degree of guidance in terms of revealing to the model the possibility of abnormalities being present in the given image. As it can be seen, when the prompt directly hints that there might be deviations from that naturalness, the Llama model has very high detection rate. On the other hand, when the prompt simply requests a class of the object in the image, Llama model responses almost never indicate any abnormalities. And well, it would make sense to say that here it is simply following the instructions of the prompt. However, what is more interesting is the results observed for prompt 2, which is arguably the most generic prompt that would serve as a go-to option for the general applications. Here, while the model was giving a complete freedom in its response, the model has constantly detection rate lower than 50%. Hence, it can be said that semantic-syntactic discrepancy remains a relevant issue for vision language models, which manifests itself when no prior precautions or warnings are supplied through the correct prompting. Comparing image-only models and vision language models, it can be said that the part of the problem is that vision models might not have an explicit way of estimating the degree of naturalness of input images. To that extent, we performed one more analysis using puzzle solving as a proxy task. Recall that the idea behind puzzle solving corruption is to show the original image along with a bunch of patch shuffling corruptions, and then evaluate how good the model is at detecting which one of those images is the most natural looking one. For image-based models, it means VIT and ResNet, we evaluated puzzle predictions based on softmax confidence scores. Specifically, the image that had the highest confidence in the predicted class was chosen as the model's prediction of which image looks the most natural looking. Along with that, we also measured the standard classification accuracy based on the class that was predicted from this same image chosen as the most confident one. For Llama model, all of the puzzles, including the original image, were provided along with the prompt requesting which one of those images appeared to be the most natural. We did not evaluate its classification accuracy, as vision language models would utilize open vocabulary for such predictions. Okay, table here illustrates the corresponding results. There are two major observations here. First, all three models have very low accuracy of determining which of the given images is the correct puzzle arrangement. The highest is observed with VIT model, which is probably due to inherent patchwise processing along with positional encoding. Second, which is the most interesting observation, is that while the VIT and ResNet failed to determine the correct puzzle arrangement, all of the images, let me show you here, they chose as the most natural, like all of the images that they chose as the most natural image resulted in almost no drop in classification accuracy. This observation implies that the high classification accuracy is attainable regardless of the arrangement of image patches, and hence highlights the presence of semantic-syntactic discrepancy. Now, this leads us to the question of whether this gap can be accounted for. In the next portion of this talk, I'm going to describe our proposed approach of learning image grammar. First, we constrain our approach to a learning setting that required it to work by only being trained on natural images. In other words, during training, the model does not observe generated SSDI images. This is motivated by two factors. First, the first factor is that humans can instinctively recognize unnatural images, even though we might not have seen any of such examples in real life. This means that the notion of unnaturalness stems from understanding the naturalness. The second factor is that it might be challenging to consider all the possible ways that SSDI can be generated. Not only the three types that we are considering in this work might not capture all other types, but also even for the three types we are considering, generating all of them during training is infeasible. As a result, we specifically designed our approach to learn image grammar from natural images only. Our approach consists of two stages. Stage one learns to identify visually distinguishable object features, that is, image semantics, whereas stage two then learns how to grasp image syntax through the relative arrangement of object features. We're not going to go into all the training details here, but we're going to go over big picture of the training and inference processes. We start with the stage one training. In the stage one, the goal was to train the model to consistently obtain object features for any given portion of the input. Specifically, the challenge here was to obtain features that would distinguish parts constituting the objects. While we tried with self-supervised and weakly supervised approaches, our initial attempts showed that they mainly focused on separating foreground and background. In other words, while, for example, they separated face from the image, they were the results, on separating intra-object features such as mouth, eyes, and nose were not at the level we wanted it to be. As a result, we opted out for semi-supervised approach, relying on using a small fraction of ground truth semantic segmentation masks. I'm not going to go into training details here, but the high-level idea is to utilize a deep clustering approach, which is we used PyC in our paper, that allows us to expand semi-supervised knowledge to the entire training set. As a result, we were able to obtain more accurate semantic features for any given portion of the image. Now, the question might be, why do we need semantic features for any patch of the image? This is related to the implementation of stage two, which focused on learning image syntax. Specifically, image syntax was learned by observing the image through a series of independent patches. Okay, as shown on the slide here, the high-level idea is to break down image into patches and make the model learn not only the semantic features within each individual patch, but also how these features of an individual patch can be explained by its neighboring patches. For example, think of how in natural image, it would make sense to predict that the middle patch should contain nose if two neighboring patches contain left and right eyes. In the current work, we only consider primitive fixed pattern of obtaining patches from the input images. However, as discussed in the paper, it is possible to extend this further by considering methods such as active vision methods, where models learn how to sequentially process the image in the most efficient manner. After patches and the corresponding semantics are obtained using stage one, bidirectional LSTM is used to learn the relationship between neighboring patches. The bidirectional LSTM is used because both forward and backward relationships are valid for learning image syntax. After the training is complete, the detection of unnatural images during inference rely on the trained bidirectional LSTM. In particular, determination of whether the image is natural or not is based on the total error between features of any patch as obtained from stage one model and the features that should be within that patch based on expectations of its neighbors as predicted by bidirectional LSTM of stage two. We proposed and analyzed three various methods to measure this error, which we term here as grammar validation methods. The first one depends on the image itself, meaning that only the neighboring patches within this image and their semantics are used to measure the error. The second and third methods depend on not only the image itself, but also on the statistics obtained during the training, such that we measure the expected semantics from for each patch. We found three methods to be useful in different scenarios and for different dataset complexities. We analyzed the capability of our proposed approach on two datasets, CelebA and Sun-RGBD. CelebA dataset was used as more object-centric dataset, with object here being human face, and hence a dataset with more rigid structure. We used a fixed circular pattern for CelebA images. As it can be seen from the plots on the slide, the total errors obtained from the bidirectional LSTM successfully separate grammatically correct and grammatically incorrect images with SSDI corruption. Once again, we want to note that corrupted images were not used during the training process. We report performance using detection accuracy and detection rate values, which are shown in the table here. Our method achieves substantial performance in detecting SSDI discrepancies. Interestingly, the proposed approach is able to solve puzzles with more than 99% accuracy. Also, the table reveals how different image grammar methods are more suitable for different corruptions and different segmentation methods. For example, the method relying on memorization of pixel-wise statistics from training set is more applicable for puzzle-solving scenarios, while the ones which relies on averaging semantics is more suitable for patch shuffling and patch blackening. Sun-RGBD dataset was used as more scene-centric dataset, with scenes here being room layouts, and hence a dataset with more flexible structure. We used a fixed zigzag pattern for these images, and in this case, the separation of grammatically correct and incorrect images turned out to be harder, probably due to more flexible nature of the images. Nevertheless, the proposed approach is still successful at detecting semantic-syntactic discrepancies. Interesting to highlight that as flexibility of images increased in this dataset, grammar validation methods that rely on memorization are less effective against patch shuffling and patch blackening. Thank you for your attention. We would like to invite you to read the full paper for more details on analysis, implementation, and results. The link to the paper and the code are available in the description of this video. Please feel free to send us email if you have any questions, recommendations, or would like to discuss any aspect of this work. Thank you and have a great day.